welcome to everybody who's come to the webinar. I want to thank you all. This is going to be maybe the second to last one of our season, but I'm very, very pleased to be able to welcome my colleague Ben Fox from Blizzard Entertainment, who is going to talk about managing player experiences through data. We will have Ben will talk for a bit, then we're going to talk a little bit about the Game Entertainment and Media Analytics Professional Master's Degree at University of Maryland. For a couple of minutes, we'll do an introduction to that, and then Ben will answer questions. So if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A window or through the chat window. We will have somebody monitoring those questions. We'll collect them, and Ben will be able to answer them at the end of the discussion. So to formally do this introduction, again, I want to welcome Ben Fox from Blizzard Entertainment. Ben has 25 years of experience in technology and data organizations with extensive knowledge of data architecture and data management and data governance. I've actually known Ben. This is the third incarnation in which I've done work with Ben. We've done work a number of times before in a number of different instances. In those last two roles, he's managed data governance for the Walt Disney Company and currently runs player game data organization for Blizzard Entertainment. And his goal is to continuously drive data literacy through various methodologies around data governance, data management, and analytics. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to Ben. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming and giving us a talk today.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I appreciate that warm welcome. Let me see if I can share my presentation here. Does that look okay? Are we getting the full screen presentation, or?
That looks good to me.
Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much for the intro, David. I appreciate it. As David mentioned, we've worked together a bit in the past, and when this opportunity came up, I was extremely excited and happy to do it. I love the subject matter. It's fantastic. I live it. I'm in a spot right now where I'm working in an organization where two worlds of mine are colliding, and those worlds are worlds that I love, gaming and data. And so it's given me the opportunity to do some wonderful things and really just be invested in what I'm doing. So for this presentation, what I'm going to do is I've got a short agenda here. So essentially, I'll give you a little bit about me, just so you know kind of where I'm coming from on this journey, why data, what it means to me, and what I think it does for organizations. I'll go into a little bit about player experience and what that means in my mind. I'll touch on some game development challenges that I've seen since being here. I'm not a game developer, so these are kind of uniquely from a data perspective. I'll provide some info, or go over some information on providing actionable insight and kind of what I think that entails. We'll do a little bit on the power of visualization, and I'll touch on kind of a little bit of what my objectives are. I can't really go into a lot of detail about what's happening at Blizzard, obviously. So I'll keep this pretty agnostic from the company itself. Just know that I work there right now, and I'll touch on a little bit of what those objectives are that I have presently, kind of what my situation is and what I'm trying to do for the company. And then the questions piece, I have a slide for questions, but as David said, we'll go ahead and go over what the program looks like first, and then you can hand it back to me for those questions. So a little bit about me. I'm currently the Director of Product Management Data for Blizzard Entertainment. That's kind of a loaded title. I came on really as a group product manager to essentially manage data as a product. I've done data as a product in the past, and I've essentially transformed the role through a few insights that I had coming in, just seeing some things that I noticed were needed in the organization. And so I've elevated the org a little bit from simply being a pipeline, more or less, of capturing game data to a platform. The data that that we gather is all player type data, so activities and things like that. Ben levels up to, level 20 in World of Warcraft. Bing, they send a message, and so there's tons of data that we're capturing. We're talking billions of messages a month, so it's massive. It's in the petabytes per month data that we're processing, so lots to do in that space, and it serves up some unique challenges that I haven't seen before in my other roles. I was at Disney for 10 years, various leadership roles in data. I ran, the last role that I had at Disney was running enterprise data governance for the Walt Disney Company. So that included kind of wrangling ESPN and Lucasfilm, Marvel, and all these different entities into a central kind of enterprise data capability. That was uniquely challenging in that a lot of these companies, even though they're part of the Walt Disney Company, aren't necessarily happy to be, kind of dictated to as far as data governance is concerned. So it really taught me a lot about the cultural aspects of building data orgs in companies, right? Because there's a lot that has to do with culture. It's really understanding how the company operates, what it's willing to hear, what it wants to listen to, and just knowing your audience. So that'll play into kind of some of the later discussions here. I've been in technology and data for nearly 30 years now. The beard starts to show the age, and like now there's nothing up top. So yeah, it's been a while. I feel really old, but this has kept me going. My family's kept me going. It's really an awesome kind of space to be in. I did author a book called Cooking with Business Intelligence. Don't bother like reading it. It's probably not that great, but it was an exercise for me to really figure out if I could articulate what it is I do. I had a lot of friends ask me in the past, like, what do you do? And I would talk about data, and I wasn't really good at articulating what it is I do. And back then I was working for financial institutions, primarily credit unions, trying to build out data organizations for themselves. And a lot of questions I got were like, well, how do I start this? Like, how do we start doing this? And I used that book exercise as a way for me to really kind of outline what the steps are in my mind, building business intelligence practice, and articulating what each of those steps are and how you get there. So that was a fun thing to take on. I loved doing it, and I'm proud of the book. I was in the U.S. Army for a few years. I was responsible for mobile communications and went to Bosnia and supported a MASH unit in Bosnia, and that was interesting as well. I bring that up because I feel like having this diversity of leadership and experiences provides me some insight around data and how data is used in different types of organizations. And so, everything from the flat organization where, you don't have a lot of hierarchical leadership driving what's going on, to like Army where, you respect the rank and you really do follow that hierarchy, and trying to kind of think about how those two worlds treat data differently and consume data differently has allowed me to kind of think of things in unique ways as I do my current job. Last but not least, I'm a father of two and a husband, and I love my family very much. My wife is German. I met her in Germany, and I've got two great kids. My son he's at Cal State Northridge right now, and he's actually getting a computer science degree. So he's almost kind of following in my footsteps. I keep trying to nudge him in the direction of data. We'll see how that pans out. So why data? Like, why is data important to me? Why do I think that it's something important that I want to talk to other people about? Like, why would I even do this presentation? I think that it's important to understand that what data does, it's a way to empower the business in many ways. Decisions can be made based on facts. It's not, a lot of times you go to organizations, find that even today, decisions are made through kind of that gut instinct. And in a lot of cases, you have some very seasoned leaders who've gone through the grinder on their specific area of interest many times. And so maybe some of those gut instincts are accurate, but it really allows us to, add information to the decision-making process that take a lot of that guesswork out. And if you're right and your gut check is great, it reinforces that. So there's a plus side of it no matter what you're doing. And I think that that's one of the important aspects of data. It also allows leadership to understand what the impact of the decisions they make is, right? It's not a one-way street where it's like, here, we have all this data for you and that you should be making this decision. Once you make that decision, you can really understand like how that has impacted your organization, your product, your service, whatever it is. And you can also start to predict what to do next. I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. You all maybe have heard of these things before, and some of this may seem rudimentary, but in my experience, there really is a lack of understanding across many organizations and many industries around how important data is and what impact it has on a business. And so it's good to make sure that even if this is a redundant thing, like you're hearing this all the time and you know it, and in your mind, you're like, yeah, these bullets, like no brainer, duh. Like it's good to have this down and really be able to articulate these things to leadership whatever company you go to or whatever role you take on. Because a lot of times we assume that people understand what these basics are and they don't. And that's quite frankly the reality of it. It allows you to identify gaps in your processes, your products, and most importantly, you can avoid regulatory trouble. One of the big things, nowadays I've gone through with massive organizations efforts to bring in a company to start complying with things like GDPR, the European Union's global data protection regulations. So essentially protecting the privacy of individuals in countries or territories. Those regulations are not going away. They're not slowing down and they're not getting less restrictive. They're getting more restrictive. So as we continue to build on regulations, for instance, right now, one of the big ones is PIPL in China. That has been extremely restrictive because it took GDPR for the most part from the European Union, and then it built on more restrictions from there and got tighter from there. So you really have to start taking a look at, not only am I building out data processes to make sure that our organizations work more efficiently and that we can take advantage of some of the data and start to like sell things to people more frequently. You also have to look at, am I within compliance here? Am I doing what I should be doing with data? Am I protecting the people who really own that data, which is your customer, your player, your member for credit unions? Like that's very important. So obviously there's a lot more. That bullet list could probably be a million lines long with all the examples, but starts to give you an idea of what's important to the business. I think the other question of why data, it's because without data, we're not making decisions, we're making guesses. And that's the bottom line. It really just comes down to, why make the guess when you have the data available to you? Let's get back on the screen here. So player experience, when we talk about what those data, those key data points are that I just mentioned, how does that pertain to the video game industry, right? Like what are the things that we need to understand from a gaming industry that are going to be most important to making sure we utilize data to drive the business, right? These are companies, after all. They are here to make money, and the biggest thing that they're looking to do is capture the attention of an audience and hold that attention. And so if the player experience is bad, and you've got people out there playing your video games, and as you can see in like the screenshot, the underlined piece in red, like they've been waiting for a match on whatever game this is, Final Fantasy 14 or 15 or whatever it is, maybe. They've been waiting 22 minutes, and it's like, seriously, I just want to get in and play the game. In that time, they start to get fidgety. The attention spans of people in general nowadays are very short. So you're asking them to wait 20 minutes to get into your game. That's not going to happen. Like most of the time, people are just going to drop off and start doing things. So what I need to know from a development standpoint and from an executive leadership standpoint is like, how long are those wait times? Where are those wait times the longest? Who is waiting the longest in those queues? How do I mitigate those wait times? And so that's the type of thing that we need to start thinking about from a player experience standpoint. How do I make the player experience something where they're going to continue to come back? I think what this rolls into is the game development challenges that come along with this. So if I'm thinking about player experiences and how players, use and kind of play with our creations, our games, some of the things I have to start understanding are player engagement. Like, how do I make sure that the people that are playing my games continue to play my games? If you go and there's a site out there called App Annie. I think you can probably get a subscription to use it or whatever. But on that site, it'll give you all kinds of information about like the mobile industry, mobile games that are out there. So you have a lot of statistics on kind of how long games, are holding attention of players. Things like, I launch a mobile game and the first week it's just like crazy with all the people, and then you start to see this dip. And there's always that kind of launch and dip. And then in a lot of cases is that dip just continues down until the game dies, or you do something to make sure engagement kind of levels out or continues to go up. And so there's a lot of information that you can use to drive those pieces of engagement, many of which require that you essentially personalize for your player. When I was in banking and credit unions and spaces like that, what I saw were over the course of several years, many small, what they're called fintechs coming in, small companies that were very high on technical IQ, and they were able to put out products or services, things like that, that really disrupted the finance industry. It really started to show the big players out there, the Chase, the Wells Fargo, that like you're going to have these small companies coming in and eating away at your member or customer base, because they offer things that allow your customers or your members to personalize their experience. And what it showed me was that in any industry, personalization is key. I want to know that the organization that I'm buying my product from understands who I am. And I think that that's not something that's new. Obviously, go to Amazon, go to Netflix, go to any organization that really utilizes data to determine who you are and what they should be offering you based on your likes and dislikes. And when you think about it, it's a pretty simple concept, but there's a lot of data involved, and you need to kind of get the right things in place to make sure that that happens. I think that what we are missing in the video game industry, and this is something, for like, especially this program, having individuals come out of this program will enable companies to be able to capitalize on something that so many other industries are starting to wake up to. And that is, how do I personalize the experience for my player? How do I make sure that when they come in, like for instance, within Blizzard, I mean, we have, if anyone plays Blizzard games here, you have Battle.net, you download the launcher, and then that's where you go get all your games like World of Warcraft and Diablo and things like that. How do I know what to offer up on that application? Same thing for Steam, for all these other platforms. How do you gather the information you need so that when I put a sale up, the first thing that you see is something that you're probably going to like? And that's key to make sure we've got this player engagement. There's a sea of games out there, obviously. I mean, just go look at Steam, for instance, and you'll see just how many games on a daily basis get launched. There's just so many of them. And it's not like the old days when I grew up as a gamer, where it was like, Atari 2600 and here's Circus Atari, or, Pitfall, or one of these. Like, these were marquee games back then that were just like, hey, this thing comes out and you're waiting for the next game, maybe in, several months. Now it's like every day there's something. And so capturing the imagination of players out there and making sure that they see you in that sea of games is another thing that you really have to focus in on from a data standpoint to kind of drive that awareness. Other areas, game stability, like as games roll out, especially nowadays, like I don't know how many gamers are on this call, but as you download games or you go to Steam or, again, some of these other platforms, you'll see that many games launch in beta state. Like nowadays, I go and look at a review and I'm like, God, that game's been out for like 2 years and it's just getting a review on IGN. Like they stay in this beta state for so long because now it's important for these organizations to not only develop a game, but develop a game with the player, not for the player. So in the old days, it was, let me just develop this game and ship it out and we'll see how it does. Now it's like, they kind of ease in, step their toe into the water and say, okay, like, here's the game we have. It's in beta, so like, don't yell at us, but they get a lot of feedback and they really start to see what players like and don't like. In some cases, the game could become completely different from what it was originally. And so that's that goes along with like stability and things like that. They can see a lot of bugs, they can get a lot of bug fixes, they can get things in and really call it done when they feel like they're at a good state. That's very critical game data to have those types of things. And so that's a facet of game analytics that are very important to the development and life cycle of the game. Latency is another thing. How quickly am I able to get critical information in front of my player? Like how fast does it take for us to patch a game? How fast does it take? Does it take us to, for instance, if I've got a new mobile game out there and I want to promote a certain aspect of that mobile game, like maybe use a certain character that's not being used that much, like how do I flip switches to be able to go out there and promote that character and give you incentive to use the character, but also get the feedback from you on that character to make sure that we're doing the right things or we're improving that character's play or the gameplay that we're trying to get you to use. I think those are all very important too to consider here. And we have to be able to understand not only is the information getting to the player and is it getting to them effectively, but are they actioning on it? Are they taking steps to do things because you gave them this information? So a lot to consider in that game space. There's also game health. Obviously, you can start going down these rabbit holes of areas that you want to see just to make the game better, especially in this world of kind of games or games as a service. World of Warcraft is obviously a very, one of the most popular ones, but essentially, the game's been out for 17 years now or something like that. And I've been playing it since day one and it just continues to evolve. It's a living thing. You need to be able to get that information back. Like what areas of the game are used and unused? Like, are there certain continents that just completely devoid of people? That area sucks. Like, let's go fix it. That's the kind of thing that you need to start thinking about. What do players avoid? What do they love? What do they love to do? What do they love to use? Like what features in your game? Like a lot of games, incorporate crafting. Are the people using crafting? Those are the types of things that we need to give feedback to executive leadership and producers to help them make the games better. And then balancing. This is another example of something that is just very important. You've got in a lot of these games, different character classes. There's often PvP, player versus player type activities that happen. How do you make that fair and balanced so someone doesn't feel like, oh, I get in here and I play and every time someone kills me, like this really sucks. If you look at something like Fortnite, they will pair you with people at your level as you play those games because of the information that's coming back on how you play. Like, are you good? Or are you bad? So you don't feel like you're bad. You feel like, hey, this is great. I'm taking people out. I'm making it to the end of the match. Like those are things that are very important, and all of that comes from data that's fed back to the folks running the game. So how do you provide actionable insight to your leadership, to your producers, to your game developers? Like, how do you become useful when you come out of, let's say you've gone through this program and you have this degree and you're able to walk into some of these organizations? What do you do to make yourself valuable? Well, obviously, your knowledge and what you've learned in the course makes you very valuable. But you also need to kind of take into consideration other things. Be prepared to provide actionable insight and utilize what you've learned here to move the company forward. And so I think first and foremost, this is true for the gaming industry, but play, like you should be playing video games. If you're not playing video games and you're doing a lot of analysis on video games, I would find it difficult to, like, first of all, get that type of insight if you're not experiencing the things that our players are experiencing. So at the very least, try to have some knowledge of the product and understand that. And if it's banking you go into, like, understand finance, understand how lending works. Those are the types of things that are very important. So you want to play what you analyze. You also want to be able to consider what are the challenges players face while playing games. If you're playing those games, you're going to run into those challenges, and anything you run into, I guarantee you other people are running into. So that's where you start to formulate hypotheses around, like, why this is happening, like what's going on here, what are we seeing, why is this one area, why don't people want to play it, what do I not like about it? So you start to develop a hypothesis, and as you develop that hypothesis, you start to think of things like, what types of data will I need to support this hypothesis? How do I bring this forward and demonstrate to the organization that they have a challenge here, and here's how they should mitigate that challenge? And last but not least, I think that once you have that hypothesis and you've gone through and supported it with the data that you need, and it's become an actual thing, you need to tell a story. I think to be in the data organization, data industry, you really need to be a storyteller. You can't be someone that's just kind of clicking away at the keys and then spitting out reports and things like that. There's high importance on how you deliver the data and how you tell the story about what it is you're providing to your organization. So, it's one thing, back in the 90s, let's say, there's still a lot of companies that are stuck in that 90s paradigm of, here's your reports and dashboards. That doesn't really hold a lot of water anymore, right? Like, just me going to a dashboard and just seeing a bunch of numbers and spreadsheets and things like that on there, that doesn't tell me much. People are looking for, just as players are looking for you to personalize for them and take that extra step for them so they don't have to go find the information, your organization is looking for you to do that for them. So rather than you handing them a spreadsheet that says, here's all the activities that took place, you need to aggregate that information and tell a story around, here's what I see that is happening in this space. This is what this data is telling me. I see all these drops at a certain time period, like something's going on in the middle of the day, and you're experiencing severe drops in your concurrent players that are online in the game, right? So what is that? And start to do the investigation to kind of work through that so you can tell an actual story. Because the best way people learn and listen to things is through storytelling. So how do you do that storytelling? Like, a big part of that is really around visualization. And I don't know how many of you have seen this. This is a pretty famous visualization, but essentially this is the march into Moscow. I think Napoleonic march into Moscow. And if you look at like the graph here, the reason this is so fantastic, and it's really old, is that at the beginning, on the left side of this graph, you see this beige kind of weird jagged line that goes up. The thickness of that beige space is the size of the army as it marched to Moscow, right? So you can kind of see in what path it took, and it goes over this essential like map that you can kind of see behind it with little rivers and things like that. But you can see as the march went on, there was this just drop in number of soldiers that were making it to that point in Moscow to kind of do what they wanted to do, what they needed to do. And what it shows is the devastating toll this took on that army, as the black is the march back home. And if you look at kind of what that black line looks like, it's a sliver. Really demonstrate how many people were lost in that effort. And I think this is true storytelling in data visualization. At the very bottom of this graph, you also see the temperatures over that period that these soldiers had to deal with. And so this really is a method, like putting all this information into one visualization to tell a story. It's a fantastic way of doing it. And I think that's what you're aiming for with your data. There's a pitfall here though, because as you attempt to try to tell really good stories with visualizations and with your data, you can get into spaces where you're telling really bad stories. and visualizations can bite you because they get overused, or they don't really tell a lot of the story, or you're just, certain nuances like the one on the left where everything's red, like it's all shades of red. Like, why not break that out into actual colors? They wanted to keep some type of, like color scheme going there with their header and all that. And that's nice, but it really takes away from being able to figure out like, what the heck is going on here? Like, what am I looking at as far as these ages? I got to look up at that low key and kind of understand, okay, I guess the darkest is the youngest and all that type of stuff. So you don't want your audience doing that with your data. You don't want them digging for you. You want them just to consume. And like the other map, very little, like there's a story that's kind of told in that map, and then you can just look at it and it tells you exactly what it's supposed to. Let's see, I'm seeing a chat here. Oh, yeah, please submit your questions through QA. Absolutely. I'll be able to answer your questions at the very end. The other two images here, that one on the top right, I have no idea what's going on there. It just looks like a tornado of data, all kinds of colors, things going on. I mean, you really get lost in this, and this is like a kind of number of deaths type of scenario. It's really weird way of demonstrating this data. And then the bottom right, like my favorite of all is the pie chart, which is typically useless, I think. In a lot of cases, there's no context provided in a pie chart, right? So when you're talking about data and visualization, I had a guy that I worked for at Disney, and like he despised pie charts. So I called him the pie man, and I used to send stuff to him just on purpose, little pie charts here and there, just to kind of mess with him. But if you look at this pie chart, like, what is this telling you? Nothing. I don't know what this means. And that's the problem with it. They're very easy to go to. People all know pie charts. It's like, oh, so this piece of the pie. Well, what's the context? And that's the story you're telling. You need to bring context to the table when you're trying to do these types of things. Try and tell a story. So what are like the objectives of building out a data organization to do all of this, right? So I've kind of gone through and talked about like, what are the challenges? What's the player experience? How do you provide actionable insight? What the end result is, that data visualization. How do you make that tell a story? And then ultimately you have to have an organization around that is supporting you and making sure that the story you're telling is actionable, that the data is reliable, that you're able to push out data offerings that the organization can use. And ultimately, it sounds counterintuitive, but you're trying to put yourself out of business. And the way I say that is, you start with my objectives are, I want to implement data offerings that enable our stakeholders to successfully use data to achieve their goals. That's what I want them to do. I want to be the person that enables the business user to go and think of the ideas that they want from a business standpoint, so they can execute those with as little as friction as possible. And so my first, kind of point on this is, I want to create data offerings. What can I give them that they can use to get at the data? And that's not just reports and dashboards. That's automation of processes, automation of systems. They push a button and they get some insight, or they push a button and someone tells them, they get some predictive analysis that says, hey, today you should be doing this because the last week has not been good, so go make this change. That's the kind of thing that we should be providing. In order to do that, I need to be able to govern my data. I need to ensure that the data I'm providing is not only actionable, but it's timely, it's accurate, it is free from duplication and errors and things like that. So this analysis piece, you have to really bake pieces into your analysis and what you're providing your stakeholders. You have to bake in data quality rules. You have to bake in the fact that you have gone through and you've verified that this data is accurate. You want your stakeholders to trust what you're telling them. And a few bad instances of them finding out that, oh, this is duplicate data or you're missing something, really erodes the confidence, and it's hard to get that back. So it's important up front to make sure that you're governing that data and that you're able to protect the data and protect your players, but also drive the business. The other thing is managing data capabilities. There's an operational standpoint of this, and you have to make sure that those things are happening on a regular basis. We've got to manage stakeholder commitments. You've got to manage stakeholder expectations. Communications has to be done very well. And so you want to make sure that these things are considered as you're going through your effort to analyze and provide analysis on data. Even if you're taking a role where you come out of this program and you're just going to be an analyst in some company and you're providing that, all of this still holds true to you. I'm not necessarily saying you have to go build your own organization, but all of these concepts should be there. If there is not a data governance organization where you're at, it's still your responsibility to be providing accurate data. You can't throw your hands up and say, oh, there's no data governance organization, like I'm not going to do this. You have to do that. You have to ensure that, is the data I'm getting accurate? Can I trust this? Can my stakeholder trust this? Is it on time? And hold people accountable for making that happen. Data governance, especially, is in the hands of everyone in the organization. And if you look at some of the past really bad, like, what are considered like breaches or, personal data faux pas, like, you look at the big one with Facebook, that was not a data breach where someone, got into from the outside, snuck into their systems and wreaked havoc. That is a breakdown of policy. There was not a strong structure on policy on how data is used, how long they keep it, who they give it to. And so that breakdown in policy comes down to the weakest link, the people. Like if someone doesn't do something and there's no process for them to follow to ensure that they're treating data the way they should, you're in trouble. So it's up to you to make sure that those things are happening. Let's see. Okay. Should I, I'll leave these, I'll answer these at the end, but please continue to put them in there. That's good. I'm glad you guys have some questions. And then last but not least, you want to modernize data delivery, getting access to data, using data to automate systems, to hook up to systems, to, there's a lot of integration things to consider, but you want to continue to make sure that what you're using is kind of a modern approach to data. I think that that's very important. I mean, no one's asking you to go out and spend $1 million, but what the modernization I'm talking about is best practices from a modernization standpoint. Like make sure your data has some redundancy to it. Like if something goes down, if you lose data, like one of the things I tell people all the time is we've got a staff of people, and definitely our people are, one of our most cherished resources. But if a person leaves a role, they can be replaced, and the person can come up to speed and they can take that role. If I lose last Monday's data on what Joe Smith did while he was playing World of Warcraft, and I don't have that anymore, it's gone. I don't get to go back and reproduce that. I can't go back in time and make that happen again. I could probably create some type of scenario where it's like that, and I can try to reproduce that, but I can't reproduce that moment in time. Once that data is gone, it's gone. And that's what you have to be very careful about. And that's what I mean by modern data practices, is making sure you have redundancies and tools in place to avoid data loss, to avoid the wrong people accessing your data, to make sure that your data is organized correctly, that access to data doesn't take an arm and a leg to get to. Let's go to the next one. So in my world, and I can't give you a lot of detail, like I said, about my specific organization, but I can kind of tell you how I'm organizing my team. And this is really how I do this at any organization. So this isn't Blizzard specific, but data product is the team in my mind and my organization that goes out and sits with the stakeholders and understands what the needs are, not what the stakeholder tells you and says, I want you to give me a report on this. That's not stakeholder management. With regard to data, you really need to understand what the stakeholder does on a daily basis. What are they trying to achieve? What are the problems they see the most? And when the conversation starts to steer into the data realm, that's when you need to kind of cut the conversation and move it back in the other direction. Really what you want to talk about is the business and what it is they're trying to achieve, how they do their work, where, what the biggest headache they have on a daily basis is. And then you translate that into data needs, because The worst thing you can do is allow a stakeholder to kind of come in and just dictate what it is they want. And then you give them some report, and it turns into this kind of back and forth transaction of you constantly tweaking what it is they really want to see, because they don't have the insight around the data. That's not their job in that data world, to really understand what it is they need. They're just asking for what they want right now. And in their mind, they may just be solutioning that this is a report. In your mind, you might see all what they're asking or what they're talking about from their role and say, you know what, this is not a report. This is me automating your system to do X every day for you, so you don't have to look at a report. So that's really what you want to start thinking of. The analytics piece is very important, but it bleeds into so many other things. And having this, degree and coming out of this program, I think would really help in understanding that aspect of it, because the first step is like, what's the analytics? What is the analysis? The second step is, how do I take data and use it to drive business process? That's really what the business needs. The second piece is engineering. Obviously, I have engineers and I want them to kind of build these processes for me. I need them to understand what they are. And the data product team is really responsible for articulating to our engineers what the business needs. They are not to solution the actual specific technologies. I've been railing on the team to kind of stay away from technology solutioning. Even if you have a technology background, you don't need to do that. Let the engineers do that. That's their job. Obviously, I talked about the data governance piece. It's very important for us to govern the data that we are talking about. Hugely important on that front. And then data health, in my mind, is really the operational piece. How do I make sure that on a day-to-day basis, my data is healthy, it's accessible, it's like I'm not gonna have outages, I don't have things like that. So that's how I think about the organization here. The analytics that comes out of all of this is usually an easier byproduct when these pieces are together. And like I said, if you're not in an organization where you can actually put groups together like this and actually make this an org, you at least want to think about these things as far as your process for deriving insight and storytelling from your data. So make sure that whatever you're providing is the easiest thing for your stakeholder to use. You're giving them the white glove service, and that's what you want. You want them not to think about the process or the technology or the limitations. You want them to think about the story. So that's that. Like I said, questions will come after David's piece here, but that's it. That's kind of my take.
Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate it. You've given us some pretty good insights. I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about our program, and then we got some really good questions coming in while you were talking, and so we'll cycle back on that as well. So let me share my screen, and hopefully you can see the slides. So I want to talk a little bit about the program that Ben was referring to. He's referring to the Master of Professional Studies in Game Entertainment and Media Analytics, or what we call GEM Analytics, here at University of Maryland in the College of Information Studies. And I think the question here is what is motivating us to put together this program? And so there is no business like show business. The annual entertainment revenues are huge, and they're going to continue to increase with a prediction of moving from $2.1 trillion in 2018 to $2.6 trillion in 2023. Playing video games is a huge engagement for entertainment for adults in the United States. Over half of the population of the United States plays video games, and that's only looking at adults. And revenues are huge. Streaming video on demand is projected to grow at a annual growth rate of over 10% to 2025. Also a multi-billion-dollar industry. And Ben, you actually said this: game, entertainment, and media companies increasingly want to attract and hold on to their customers' attention. There's a limited number of hours per day that people can spend doing entertainment things. And so it's become, even though it is hugely huge revenues, it also is very, very competitive. And so what we've done is we want to look at where game analytics comes into play, not just in the entertainment and driving the business world, but in fact, game analytics it is applicable across a number of different types of disciplines, including arts and humanities. I was mentioning before we started that I'd had conversations with folks in public health who are looking to understand about how game playing positively impacts mental health. I'm working on a project right now where they're looking at the use of game technologies to do simulations for national security and data intelligence. Games are increasingly being used in the education environment, workplace and vocational training, political science, medicine, city planning. It is applicable across a huge number of different disciplines. And so when we talk about game and entertainment and game analytics, we're not really specifically focusing solely on the games or video on demand themselves, but where these techniques can be applied to benefit across a number of different types of categories. So what is our program? It's a Master of Professional Studies in game entertainment and media analytics. It is a fully online 30-credit program. We have experts like Ben and folks from companies like Netflix and EA and other well-known names in the industry who are giving us guidance about the content, the curriculum, opportunities in the careers, et cetera. And we have it's a program that's a specialty program that focuses on the application and use of information management, analytics, and data science for understanding customer and player behaviors, improving customer and player experiences, maximizing customer lifetime value, game monetization, telemetry analysis to influence and improve game design, and as well as raising awareness of ethical use of data and ensuring protection of private customer data as well. So we look at some of those risk factors associated with analytics in that industry. What will you learn in this program? Well, it's structured to provide a holistic overview of the use of analytics in these industries. So you'll learn about, some knowledge about the entertainment and game industries themselves. We'll talk about the analytics and the data science lifecycle. All of our programs that are aligned with the Master of Information Management program like GEM focus on problem solving in the context of the industry. We look at customer profiling, customer analytics, application of data science techniques for doing things like churn analysis and retention, analyzing game telemetry, I mentioned before, to influence and improve game design, compliance issues, especially around data privacy, algorithmic fairness, data ethics, as well as inclusion, equity, and diversity within the game and entertainment context. And if you're interested in a career, there's a lot of different open jobs that I've scanned through. Here are some job titles of the hundreds of job listings for folks with entertainment with experience and knowledge of analytics in these industries: data analyst for game analytics, game data scientist, game tech solutions architect, etc. I'm not going to read through each one of these because I do want to get to some of those questions. But why the College of Information Studies at University of Maryland? Well, it is a top rank research and teaching college in the field of information science. It's located right outside of the capital of our country, the United States. We've got faculty, staff, and students who are combining principles of information science with technology, computer science, those types of things to understand how information is used and can be leveraged to improve our world. We're committed to using information for good to connect communities, empower individuals, and create opportunities. And it's a highly ranked top 10 university and top 10 college across the country in the United States. So if you're interested in learning more about the Master of Professional Studies in Game Entertainment and Media Analytics, or what we call GEM, go to https://iSchool.umd.edu/GEM, GEM, or you can email me directly, dlotion@umd.edu. We have a website. We have other events in the series that you will be able to get directed to see some of our other expert series speakers as well. I'm going to stop sharing, and we've got a bunch of questions, and I want to be able to address those questions. So let's start out, as Ben actually predicted that first question, which was, do you have any advice for college students who want to go into the gaming industry as a data analyst?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely, like David said, one that I've kind of expected to hear. I would say a couple things, right? So my advice with regard to even like gaming industry, I wouldn't even say it's specifically around gaming. I would just say data analysis in general and becoming a data analyst in any field. The important thing to remember is, and I saw that there was a question at the end here that touches on this as well, and I'll go into more detail about what storytelling means, but you really need to be able to put a story together when you are providing insight to your stakeholders. When people are looking for data analysis, they're not looking for you to come back with a spreadsheet full of numbers that says, you know, here's what I found in the system and this is my report. What they're looking for is actual analysis. They want to know that you've taken the time not only to understand the data itself and what the data is telling you, but that you can provide the context that is required to understand those insights. So for instance, I can tell you, like, our let's say we have a live game and the concurrent users, CCUs, has dropped from 100 people to 80 people in any given hour. What does that mean? Is that really bad? Is that really good? Like, there's no context that I've provided around those numbers. And so when you're becoming a data analyst, you need to have that extra layer of understanding of the business to say, okay, well, 200 is really good, 50 is really bad, anything in between is okay. Now those numbers have a context to them. They mean something. Like we've had thresholds that are been provided. So I think it's very important as you go through this to understand that the numbers are one thing, the data is another thing, but context is so important when you're providing feedback to anyone in any industry about what it is you're analyzing. So that would be my first advice. The second piece that I would say is learn to listen. And listening is not just kind of, oh, yeah, you said that you want to report on this and this is what you're doing, and I'm going to go do that, and I'll come back to you with that. Listening is really about active listening. It is sitting down with a stakeholder when you're figuring out what it is you want to analyze and what you want to do for them. It's really understanding how to echo back what it is they're saying and make sure that your understanding of it in your head matches what you're telling them and that what they're telling you, and that they agree that you understand it, and then taking it from there. And that is such a basic thing that I think, I'm still working on that to this day. Whenever I have conversations, even with my employees, like really taking the time to listen and empathize with what is being asked. What is the problem? Like, I said earlier in the presentation, I don't want to just say, oh, like you have this request for such and such, and I'm just going to go get that for you. I need to really sit down and understand, like, don't solution for me. Tell me what it is you're trying to achieve as a business person. And then let me empathize with you. Let me try to figure out, like, yeah, I can see where that would be a problem. Here's what I'm hearing you say. This is what I'm going to build for you. That's what you really want to do. So I think those are the two huge things from a data analyst perspective that people will be looking for in any industry, gaming or not. As far as specific to gaming industry, play games. That's what I would say. Play video games, know them, love them. Like, well, you don't have to love them, but like just at least know them.
That's a great answer. I want to add to that in our programs we have a capstone class. In that capstone class, one of the things that we try to reinforce is exactly what you just said, which is when our students are talking to their clients, don't listen to them to do what they tell you to do, but rather ask them and solicit from them what problems are they trying to solve, and help them come up with a solution to those problems, as opposed to trying to build some kind of artifact. So
Right.
let me jump to the next question. Does your company provide the ability for students to intern either in person or remotely? That should be a quick one.
Yeah. Yes, we do have an internship program. I actually just hired an intern that I had last summer from the University of Michigan, and Yeah, it's like they have a full internship program. I can after this kind of look up what the details are. I'm not quite sure like what the site is or who to contact, but I'll get that information over to David.
Thanks. Let's see, next one. As the industry evolves and organizations are gobbling up other organizations, how do we as students position ourselves to benefit from the evolving industry? Good question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it really goes back to knowing games, especially knowing trends in games. So, there's a point right now where I think we're into this kind of, situation where games are about like survival and like building things and trying to kind of stay in that survival mode and building out characters and stuff like that. Years ago, there was this huge thing with MMOs. And obviously, World of Warcraft was top of the heap and has been for such a long time. And then there's also these mobile kind of spurts where it's like certain types of mobile games happen. Really understand the trends in the industry around games. That's the way to stay ahead of this. It's really understanding what people are playing, why they're playing those things. That allows you to have an edge when you come into an organization and say, why things are being done the way they are. Like you can answer questions with that extra layer of knowledge that says, you have some of your own opinions on why things are happening the way they are and where we should be taking the games in general. Because the gaming industry, the gaming landscape is very diverse and it's ever changing. It's fickle. Like, there's all kinds of things that are happening with it. I think just like any entertainment medium. And like, that's really what you have to be focused in, is trying to figure out like, what are the biggest trends right now? What are going to be the next trends? And how do I figure that out? Where do I see the industry going? So I think that's probably the best thing to do to stay on top of that.
I'm gonna jump in here and remind our attendees that the applications are still open for this fall of 2022 GEM program. If you're interested, the application deadline is the beginning of June 1st. So if you are interested in applying, we still have openings. Please do not hesitate to jump over to the website ischool.umd.edu/gem. Follow the link to where it says apply now, and you should be able to start your application. Let's see, I think we have time for one more question. I actually had a question which occurred to me while you were talking as well. How does the player experience analytics that you do influence game design? So do the designers request specific types of metrics to be reported?
Yeah, there are lots of ways. First and foremost, like we provide a regular stream of data just around what people are doing in the games, right? Like for instance, there's just kind of this pre-existing thing that we've built that is constantly feeding information back around like who's using what in the games. We just put a new patch out. So what are they, what does that patch look like? Are there people using the new features? Are they not using the new features? So there's a lot of that information that gets back to them. We also have, like most game organizations have crash reporting systems. I owned that crash reporting system for the last 2 years and just handed it off to another team. But that was an interesting system in that like your game crashes on you, you get the little Windows error box and you click send report. That information comes back and it gives us all the information about like, what, video card are you using, what CPU, those types of things. And that really helps developers understand like, do I have a problem with a certain type of CPU? Is the graphics processor that I'm using not compatible with some of the code that I'm writing? So we also provide that information, just crash information, analytics about the game health itself. And then there's marketing type data, right? Like there's information about who, views certain websites, who goes and use the games in certain ways. How do we market to these folks? Like, and those are kind of critical areas where you need to keep an eye on. How do I use player data? Are we in line with compliance? And so we're very cognizant of that compliance issue as well. So yeah, there's many ways, and there's probably 100 more that I haven't answered, but yeah, they're voracious consumers of data. We're just, I think the industry in general is not very mature.
Thanks. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank Ben Fox from Blizzard Entertainment for giving us a great talk today on the data landscape around how to do player experience analytics. I want to thank all the attendees for showing up, and I especially want to thank Sarah for moderating and monitoring the webinar and taking care of all those administrative details. We will be archiving the recording and putting it up in our repository and making that available as well. So if you want to be able to share this with your friends, we will let you know how to do that. And again, thank you very much for attending our webinar today.
Thank you.
Thanks.